You're watching Parker Success Academy Clinical Rounds with Dr. William E. Morgan.
Hello, I'm Dr. William E. Morgan, President of Parker University, and this is Clinical Rounds. Today I have a very special guest, Dr. Tali Sharot. Thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a professor of cognitive neuroscience. So that's basically a combination of psychology and neuroscience. And I also mix in behavioral economics. I study how people make decisions, how emotion affects those decisions, and also motivation. And I study mostly healthy individuals, but also people with things like depression and anxiety.
Behavioral economics. So explain, you probably look at people who when the stock market's going down, they freak out and they sell. When it's going well, they get optimistic and they buy. Same with the housing market. And is that some of the things that you study?
So really, behavioral economics really means decision making.
Okay.
So those decisions can be about money per se, but it doesn't have to be. So it could be about, any kind of transaction, but not only. So behavioral economics kind of grew out of classic economics, where classic economics thought human is rational, we make rational decisions. Well, behavioral economics came to say, well, wait, there's a whole field of psychology that is telling us emotion is affecting your decisions, and people are not always rational, and there's all of these biases, and that's how behavioral economics emerged. But I'm really interested in how this combination of how our brain works, and that leads to those decisions and behavior.
One of the things you said in your speech that you had at NeuroCon was changing behavior is really changing your future. And that was, I think, the foundational statement of the whole talk was, because it really is, it's people don't want to write that check for future me. They, and the things that are going to benefit them in the future. And our audience are clinicians, and we try to help people change their behaviors, but it's so hard to do that. I think you have a concept of engaging them with certain aspects of psychology that helps them and incentivizes them to make those changes. How would they do that?
Right. Yeah, so I think the problem is, what we're trying to do when we're trying to change people's behavior is we're trying to get people to a goal, whether it's a health goal or whether it's, some kind of professional goal. And that's why you're trying to change behavior. You say, eat well now, you'll be healthy, in the future. And it's a little bit problematic because it's hard for us to make those changes now just because I'm going to be better off in the future, because, the me now would like to eat that nice chocolate cake, even if it's not good for me in the future or, even in a few hours. So that's a problem. And the thing is to try to figure out what can we do to get people to do actions that are good for them in the future, but they also are incentivized by immediate rewards, right? So this is a great example. One person after seeing my talk once came to me and said, when I go to the gym, I tell myself I'm on the treadmill, I can read those trashy magazines, which I can't normally. I don't allow myself to read trash. But when I'm on the treadmill, I read those trashy magazines. And therefore, I go to the gym because I want to read those trashy magazines. So it's an immediate reward, right? And this other person told me that they wanted their husband to go to the gym. What they did is immediately when the husband decided, okay, I'll go to the gym, they got back and the wife told them, oh, you're much more muscular, right? So again, that was the immediate reward, right? Immediately, the person felt, ooh, I can see this immediately, and that really was motivating.
That's great. What we do here at Parker is if you belong to a gym and you can show that you've been to the gym that month, we will pay a portion of that gym membership. But you have to go to the gym. So, because the problem with gyms is people join them and they don't go. But if we're going to give you a check every month for actually working out, and of course, our reward is our healthcare costs are lower by them doing that. So, you talked a little bit about optimism bias, that we tend to cling toward the better outcomes, our projections of better outcomes than negative outcomes, which is interesting. Is that harmful, or is that?
Right. So the optimism bias is basically people's tendency to overestimate the likelihood of experiencing positive events, such as, for example, professional success. Graduate students, when they leave university and you ask them, what do you think, what is your salary going to be? they overestimate their starting salary. Even if you tell them, listen, this is the average salary from the graduates from last year, they still overestimate it, right? And at the same time, we tend to underestimate the likelihood of experiencing negative events, such as accidents and illness. So for example, if you ask people, what is it likely that you will get COVID? They underestimate their own likelihood of getting COVID. Now, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? And the answer is yes, both, right? So on the one hand, if I have these positive expectations, if I think I'm gonna succeed, I'm gonna get that promotion, then I put in the effort to get to that place because I can imagine it, I can believe it. So it enhances my motivation. So my predictions impact my behavior, right? And the behavior will change the outcome. But on the other hand, if I'm underestimating my risk, I think, well, I'll smoke, it'll be fine. I won't get cancer and unlikely to get COVID. Well, then I'm not taking precautionary action, right? And that could be the risk.
Well, that one cigarette is not going to give you cancer.
One cigarette is not, but it never ends at one. Right?
I know it does. Well, that's the rationale, I would imagine. Right. Well, one piece of cake won't make you obese, right. But it's the trend, the slippery slope. So you also talked about control versus lack of control. The people who have anxiety on airplanes, they don't have any control over that. And control actually helps with happipness too, that if you have things in control. So if we as doctors give our patients choices, limited choices, you said 2 to 3, and let them select their outcomes. Like, so do you want to go ahead and go this route here, do exercise and therapy, or do you want to just get therapy, or do you want to not even do anything? So by giving them the choices, it will increase their likelihood of them falling through. Is that true? Right.
You tell someone, you say, okay, listen, this is what the plan I have for you. You do like this, right? You go to exercise every day for 20 minutes, and you'd eat this and do that. A person feels they don't have control anymore, right? Someone else is telling them what to do, and they kind of don't want to do it. But if you give people the opportunity to build their plan, to choose between different options, then they become more committed because they think, well, if I chose that was probably a really good decision, right? It's probably the best path to go, and they're more motivated in that direction. That being said, some decisions are hard, and sometimes a client or a patient would rather have you make the decision for them. But even in those cases, when they say, listen, I want you to tell me what's best, in fact, they made a decision. They made the decision to let you make the decision, right?
Oh.
You see, so often I do this with my kids as well, and a lot of the advice that I have works really well with kids. So for example, I would tell my daughter, do you want to choose your outfit, or do you want me to choose it for you? And sometimes she would rather have me choose, but still, she maintains agency. She maintains control.
She had the option to do it herself, and at least she knows she has some say in the matter if she chose to.
And she selected it, right? She made a choice. She said, I want you to choose. By doing that, she actually made a choice. She had agency.
That's great. Well, right now, my entire executive team's reading a book, and it's called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. And it talks about moving institutions forward. But one of the things they say is to move forward, you have focus on an area, but also the goal has to be made by the people doing it, not by the bosses. Like you might we're projecting we're going to move the university this direction, but we need you to help us there. How are you going to help us? And if they choose that, then they have buy-in. If they choose it, now they're getting, and also in the same book, it had having a scorecard that you, just like you talked about the hand washing, immediate response. So not less than every week, everybody looks at the scorecard. How are we doing? How close are we to that goal? And as you were talking, I was thinking, boy, there's a lot of this in this business book about what you're talking about engagement, control, choice. And then by having the choice, they have buy-in, and they'll execute the choice.
Right, because they're more committed to it, And sometimes, this is kind of a little trick, but sometimes you may have a very clear idea of what should be done. But if you get the person to feel like they came up with it, right? They came up with a path. You want to lead them, and they feel they are actually the one who has generated this idea. Then they're more committed.
I've heard that Abraham Lincoln was really good about that, that you'd go in there, he'd make you feel like the smartest person in the world, and basically, you're doing what he wanted him to do, but you left feeling like it was your idea, and the President of the United States just gave me a pat on the back for coming up with that idea. So there's other aspects of this. We don't have time to go into all the things of your speech, but are there any resources or books that you would recommend reading?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have a couple of books.
Okay, let's hear them.
The Optimism Bias is the first one, and The Influential Mind is the second one. So those are two. Then, there's Kahneman's book. So Daniel Kahneman got the Nobel Prize, and he has the book Thinking Fast and Slow. That really is like, he really talks about all the biases.
Mm-hmm.
He really covers almost everything in terms of biases in human decision making. So that's a good one. But if you want to go to my lab's website, so it's Affective Brain with an A. Affect is emotion, so affectivebrain.com. And so there you can find both the really technical academic papers that we have, but also quite a lot of essays that, for just the general public, as well as videos and things like that.
Very good, and we're gonna post that on the screen. So you talked about decision making and how we as a species have been so successful, and part of it's finding patterns and reacting to patterns. Can you expound upon that? Like, what are some of the reasons we've been able to anticipate bad outcomes, maybe that other species can't? And is that unique to humans?
Right. So one kind of ability that humans have that probably other animals do not have is the ability to imagine the future, to simulate events that haven't happened yet. The way that we do that is we take bits and pieces of memories, right, of episodical memories, things that happened to us in the past, maybe things that we've seen in a movie, and then we put them together to create this new thing, right? And by doing that, we are then able to test these things out in our mind before we go and execute them to figure out if that's a good idea or not, right? And one way that we figure it out is once we kind of simulate and imagine this thing, let's say you're thinking, shall I move to this other state or shall I stay where I am? So you imagine how it would be, that generates an emotional reaction. And if the emotional reaction is more positive, you're more likely to go do it, right? And if it's more negative, you're less likely to do it.
So this is a little bit off beaten path. I heard somebody recently talk about people who believe conspiracy theories have a genetic predisposition for that. Have you heard anything along those lines?
That we have a genetic
Some people have more of a genetic...
Some people are more likely to
believe conspiracy theories than others.
Well, this may be, and it's not that the genetics is specifically about conspiracy theories. It may be like a very basic thing, and I'm trying to think what that could be when it's conspiracy theories.
Social incentives.
Yeah, but you can imagine that some of these things have, so people with, for example, dogmatism, for example, may be related. And again, some people are more likely to be dogmatic than others, and there is some kind of genetic basis to that personality trait.
Very good. That's not probably too clinically relevant for our audience, but we also, and I talk a bit about neuroplasticity and creating anticipatory emotions and eager anticipation, how that actually increases the brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And you talked a little bit about eager anticipation, and how can we use that maybe for patient care to enhance the outcomes with our patients?
I think there's things that they can really look forward to, right? On the diary, and things that are probable, that they can actually go ahead. So I don't know, someone is in rehabilitation and they have booked a vacation where they have to get better in order to go on that vacation, right? And so it's motivating, and it also enhances their well-being and happiness because they can imagine themselves walking on the beach, right, swimming or whatever.
So he has that incentive, like, I'm going on that vacation 2 months. I better do the exercises the doctor has recommended. I better make those appointments. You also use transcranial magnetic stimulation, of which we have a neurocenter up in Frisco it's pretty well equipped, and it has transcranial magnetic stimulation where you kind of turn off portions of the brain to evoke a response. And can you tell me a little bit more about how do you use that for therapy or just mainly experimentation?
No, I don't do therapy at all. I just, I do research. And in fact, that TMS study was a unique one. That's the one study with TMS that I did. We have it in our university. It's available. And it was just another way to examine what the underlying mechanisms are. So I often start with behavior. then I tend to go into the fMRI scanner, functional MRI scanner, to kind of look to see what are the mechanisms involved. And then the next step, often I do some kind of manipulation. Because when you just look at brain activity in the scanner, that just tells you about correlation. You're like, well, this is the activity that I see with this behavior. It's correlated, but I don't know if it's causing it. And so then I like to do some kind of causation, causal manipulation. One way is TMS, but another thing that I do often is actually pharmacological manipulation. So for example, I may enhance dopamine by giving people L-DOPA. To see what happens, right?
And see what happens in the functional MRI.
Oh no, usually I just do behavior. You could combine it. We've done combinations.
Okay.
But I go to the fMRI and I say, oh look, the nucleus accumbens is really important. The striatum is really important. The VTA in the midbrain, which we know is rich in dopamine, is really important. We can see it's activated. That doesn't tell us that dopamine is actually causing the behavior. So then what I do, I will manipulate dopamine to see if it changes the behavior.
Got it.
Or I would use TMS to shut down the brain region that I saw in the scanner to see if that changes the behavior. So kind of I like to get the complete picture using all different methods.
And it really comes down to behavior probably as much as anything. It's like the studies for Alzheimer's where they've looked at beta amyloid plaques and tau proteins. Oh, that must be causing it. So for 20 years we were chasing that, and it's probably just the ash of the fire, not even what's causing it. It's just visible. It's visible on their brains, but it might not have anything to do with the actual mechanism, other than being a byproduct of that. So it might be just a biomarker. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Your talk was wonderful. It's been wonderful chatting today. You've been listening to Clinical Rounds with Dr. Tali Sharot.
Thanks for watching another episode of Parker Success Academy Clinical Rounds with Dr. William E. Morgan.